Good afternoon. Isaiah Oliver here, President and CEO of the Community Foundation of Greater Flint. If you heard me introduce myself before, you know I always start by saying I lead an organization focused on engaging people in the world of philanthropy. This is giving time, giving treasure, giving testimony and ties to making our community a better place to live in and work in and contribute to. And as a result of this work, I get the opportunity to work alongside some amazing people. Many of you will know that over the last almost 5 years, the Community Foundation of Greater Flint has been engaged with some national work called Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation. That work was instigated by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. The Community Foundation was one of 14 communities that was invited in to share in that work. And every year since then, we have celebrated the day after MLK, the National Day of Racial Healing. Just earlier today, the Community Foundation of Greater Flint and a number of partners that you're gonna meet some of them later, were able to view a video that we provided to the W.K. Kellogg Foundation to support the National Day of Racial Healing. We're going to tee that video up, and just after you all view that video, you will be in the hands of Mrs. Lynn Williams. Lynn Williams has worked at the Community Foundation for 22, almost 23 years. She serves as a community engagement officer, and she will be facilitating a panel talking about where the healing begins right here in Flint. Right now, you'll be viewing the video, and after which you'll be in the hands of Lynn Williams. Thank you all so much for signing on.
Flint is an amazing, beautiful, and complex city.
If you ever need to be encouraged or inspired by the real grit of humanity, you will find that in Flint.
The water crisis was a moment in our history, the Flint city history, where 100,000 people, that includes aging seniors and 10,000 0 to 5-year-olds, were exposed to lead in their drinking water.
When most people think of the Flint water crisis, they think of lead, but it was really much more than that. It started with a crisis of democracy. That really created a crisis of trust in government at all levels.
How do we remediate these type of environmental injustices? How do we move forward working together for low to moderate income areas, Black and brown communities? We definitely have to value each other as human beings first.
The water crisis really acted as a catalyst. It provided an opportunity to really have meaningful conversations about race.
The underpinnings of truth, racial healing, and transformation teach us that we place the hierarchy on the value of human life, and how that shows up in our society is people have differential access to health care or goods or services or quality housing.
We began to bring in healing practitioners to support the grounding that's going to be necessary to see one another in our common humanity.
How do you begin the process to do your work while other people are doing their work, and you're willing and open enough to do it together?
Multi-sector problems require multi-sector solutions. The ways that we had to partner to get through the water crisis was also the systems that we needed to build to be able to respond to whatever crisis come in the future.
We developed a partnership with the city of Flint around a public housing initiative called Choice Neighborhoods. We have undertaken the COVID-19 Task Force on Racial Inequities.
Post George Floyd, there were a number of commitments around what we would do to engage police in the most authentic ways, to support police engaging community in the most authentic ways.
We had our entire local police force participate in the healing circles.
And that also allowed us to look at some very specific changes in policies and practices that we're going to elevate. We're going to put forth a report to the police chief and support advocacy around healthier environment for police to serve in. As a racial healing practitioner, it's part of my role to create a space for people to speak their truths.
Right, but ultimately healing comes from the inside out. So it first starts with the work we need to do within.
I can see the difference in our police force. I can see the engagement and the morale being lifted because now they understand how to de-escalate situations, how not to be so fearful of people because of their color.
Truth, racial healing, and transformation work is so important in Flint because much of what has happened in Flint has its underpinnings in racial inequity and systemic and structural racism.
In order for us to reestablish a level of trust in this community, we have to inspire a level of hope.
It's transformational because you do the work, but the world seems different. More seems possible. Partnerships seem possible where before they weren't.
Now we're in a much better place. We recognize who we are and what the task is ahead of us.
I don't think I've been involved in any circle that has really been a negative experience or that didn't have some type of impact.
When you look out at your community and humanity is front and center, and the contributions that community get to bring to bear, you say, man, what a beautiful world.
Well, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. As Isaiah mentioned, I'm Lynn Williams, and I am the Community Engagement Officer at the Community Foundation. In that role, I've had a number of just awesome opportunities to deal with or to work with or to partner with some community champions. And today I'm excited to have a conversation with some community champions that have been really formidable forces in this community around racial healing. Today, we're going to be talking with Dr. Deborah Holden, who's the Associate Dean for Public Health Integration for the MSU School of Human Medicine. She's an epidemiologist and wears many, many other hats. And really, she's kind of a celebrity because, you can't even log on to Facebook without seeing her at any day of the week. And then we also have Elizabeth Jordan, who's a senior program officer at the Ruth Mott Foundation. And she is also a racial healing practitioner with the Flint Truth Racial Healing and Transformation Initiative. We have Mona Eunice, director of the ETF for short. Mona, I hope I don't mess this up, but Environmental Transformation Movement. She's also a racial healing practitioner. I got it right? All right. And we also have Patrick McNeil, who is the executive director of North Flint Action Council. He's also a racial healing practitioner, as well as many other things. He's everywhere. Actually, all of these panelists wear many, many hats. And I'm, again, just really excited. I'm honored, really, that they allow me the opportunity to be in their presence and to learn from them. So thank you all for being here. Before we actually get into that conversation, just a little bit of background about some of the scope of our racial healing in Flint. In Flint, we've been involved, I think Isaiah mentioned early on when we started around 2017, but some of the things that we've done in the area, and this is just a few of the things that we've done in the area. We have had racial healing circles that involved residents from Choice Neighborhoods Initiative. So from Atherton East, from University Park and Smith Village, where residents were beginning to talk about and envision and make plans for what a welcoming neighborhood can look like. We've done racial healing circles with the Flint Police Department. With Sunrise Rotary, we've been doing a series of circles. We recently did a circle with some Genesee County employees. We also have been embarked in a number of other narrative change type efforts. For instance, we've had a speaker series where the Community Foundation partnered with the U of M Flint, Sloan Museum, and the city of Flint to talk about what it looks like to own our truth and embrace our future as it relates to neighborhood development, as it relates to separation and segregation in Flint and the history, and how it can impact in the future and the ways in which we can engage people to make change. There's advocacy work that has happened under this banner. The Genesee County COVID-19 Task Force has done tremendous work with regard to advocacy and highlighting the disparities and inequities and rallying for change, for relationship building, partnership, and change. So that's just some of it. There's much more, and I'm sure that we will get into some of it a little more as we get into the conversation today. This was all made possible through a grant from the W.K. Kellogg Foundation that resulted in the creation of an endowment fund to support truth, racial healing, and transformation. And we're appreciative and better, that much better as a community for these resources. So as we begin, I think I want to start, Dr. Deborah, with you, because you were on the team very early that set the course for the work that we're doing in Flint. So the first thing I'd like to ask you is, when the design team for Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation began, was that your introduction to the concept of racial healing? Or if not, how does it fit within what you have adopted as your position regarding racial healing?
So I'm glad that you didn't ask me these questions in advance, because I probably would have cleaned my answer up, but I'll tell you the truth. Before I came to Flint, I was in Baltimore. And Baltimore, I believe, is also a TRHT place site, and they have been deeply steeped in the truth, racial healing, and transformation work. And I'll be honest, I wasn't open to it when I was in Baltimore. I said, I got real work to do. I can't, good luck. It sounds great. All of that. Being in Flint, I've been very humbled to have the opportunity to do the kind of work that I do in a community where people really are, you will not do it to us or for us. You will do it with us or not at all. And so it wasn't my first exposure and understanding of it, but it was the first time that I actually rolled up my sleeves and did the work. I had enough humbleness and humility to say, I already know this community. I can't participate as a scientist or somebody on the outside. I actually have to do the work as well. So it was my first, I will say, authentic and deep exposure to the work was being in Flint.
Thank you for that. Yes. And so how do you feel from the time of the initial start of the work in Flint to where we are today? How have your feelings and thoughts evolved? And where do you think we are as a community with regard to racial healing?
So it's really interesting because, this is the work where you can't, I thought, what most people want from Dr. Deb is can you help me write a grant? Can you help with the data? Can you help with the this? So that's sort of what I thought I would do here. And then old brother Oliver said, oh no, dear. You must first participate in the work. You have to be an active participant in the work, or you can't, we don't need you for that. And so I, helped to support some of the design work, and then myself and others in this community participated. And I think one of the early healing circles that happened in Flint, and I will tell you, it was probably the most impactful 2 days of my life, because I walked in there good, like I was good. You know what I mean? And I walked out of the healing circle. That's just like part one. But I walked out of there with a real consciousness about my own internalized hurt. Even though I do the work, I have been doing a lot of what I've been doing on top of my own hurt, my own resentments, my own anger about what is so. And anger had honestly, before this work, been fueling a lot of what I've been doing. I had been asking for partners in outrage. What I wanted is other people to be as outraged as I was about racial inequity and racism. And I wanted them to join the fight with me and be my partners in outrage. What I got when I came through that process was I was no longer seeking partners in outrage, but I was seeking partners in healing and transformation. Because the healing that happened over here is something that I want for everyone.
Okay. Thank you. That's definitely a description of a transformational process in and of itself. Elizabeth, somebody that I have worked with for a long time in this community on a lot of things, a lot of similar things. Tell us about your experiences with regard to racial healing and just how it has impacted you personally and professionally, if you'd like.
Certainly. Well, you're right, Linda. This is a realm that you and I and many others in this here today have been involved with for some time. And so it's in being introduced to TRHT and racial healing circle, it wasn't the first time I'd heard of some of these concepts, but the approach is so different from many of the approaches that I've been involved with before. Not that other approaches don't also have merit, but what I found to be really different about this is that in starting with a racial healing circle, it centers the story and the personal experience, the feelings, the relationships, in a way that makes it impossible not to fully hear the people that you're in the circle with. So often when we talk about issues of race or racism or politics, we're talking at the level of thought, of sometimes abstraction, or sometimes from the standpoint of who is right, who is wrong, who's got the right facts. And in going into a healing circle process, it's not that the facts and who may be right or wrong, it's not irrelevant, but it's not the focus of that space. And I think when we're trying to have conversations in new ways that allow towards that collective building that Dr. Deborah talked about, if we're going to involve people in that kind of collective vision, we have to first get into a different kind of relationship with each other. And so for me, what was a really useful addition of this process was that way of creating space for people to really share their personal truths, not a lecture, not sharing information, but sharing their personal stories in a way that you're right there with somebody else. And even if you've never experienced exactly what they have, there's something in your life where you have felt that sense of hurt, or that sense of concern, or that sense of worry or celebration. There's something in that story that you have a chance to connect with. And out of that connection and that shared sense of empathy, then you have a different foundation for trying to work through some of those more cerebral things of how do we strategize? How do we make sense of what's going on in the world around us? But before we can really do that, we have to first have a connection with each other.
That is good. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you very much for that. I want to go to Mona. And also as a racial healing practitioner, what are some of the takeaways or the impactful moments that you have experienced since you've been involved with the TRHT racial healing work?
Well, I've been really privileged and excited to be part of the racial healing work in a number of different spaces. So I came in and I was so excited to be part of the first group of practitioners. So we're the ones who help lead the conversations, or really facilitate, not lead. We facilitate the racial healing conversations where the relationship building and the storytelling and the connection is built. So I've done some that were more general open circles, and then some in very specific spaces, like within the police department. And then the other, and also within the Choice Neighborhoods work, where we were connecting relationships between new neighbors that were going to come together as a neighborhood was being, more housing was being developed in a neighborhood, bringing different groups together. And then the other thing that's been I think part of my evolution with it is to think about how to make TRHT the frame. So truth, racial healing, transformation, the frame for how I go about my work at the city. And so working with groups like the St. John Street Historical Committee, where for the past 6 months, we've been working on developing a vision, a plan for the memorial to the neighborhood that was demolished because of the city's urban renewal work, you know, that literally wiped a Black and immigrant neighborhood off the map in many decades past, and that pain is still there. And so one of the things I would say, I think everybody probably has an experience similar to Miss Deborah's, where they go in thinking like, okay, well, I'll try it out. And then they come out of it with these new friendships. And those friendships then create an opportunity for people to connect in the community on the actual design, the actual change work, that systemic policy change work, or, you know, differences in practices within our organizations or how we work together. The other thing I think that has evolved for me in this, and working with the St. John Street group really is what helped me really clarify and see this, is that when it's the frame for all of our work and our conversations and how we function together, and you go into those partnerships explicitly saying we are going to do racial healing and transformation in how we interact together, how we share our truths, and how we build together, then it gives you a grounding where I don't find it uncomfortable to talk about difficult racial issues, but it's not true for everybody, you know? And I think if you go into it with that frame of we are all going to face these very difficult truths, and we are going to come out of it stronger, and we are going to do what we can to make our time together be healing, in the sense of not only letting people speak their truths, but then trying to actually change the situation on the ground in Flint. It gives you an accountability in those conversations that you go back to. And that's something I'm really excited for, because as a public servant in the city, we all have to be doing that. Every one of us, I don't care what role you're in the city or any government agency, if we're going to build trust, if we're going to be really guided by social equity and sustainability, this gives us a way to do it. I know that sounds abstract, but I could talk a little bit more about that later. It's a frame. It's a way of being, I think, that goes beyond the circles.
I totally agree with you on that, Mona. I've talked a lot, in fact, at the Community Foundation about Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation framework not being a program, not being an initiative, but being a way of being part of the air that we breathe. And so, yeah, definitely agreeing with you. So, Patrick McNeil, let's bring you in here. Come on and tell us about your experiences, your thoughts, and the ways in which you've applied TRHT, racial healing in Flint, in various aspects of your work. Uh-oh, Patrick, you're saying wonderful things, but we can't hear you. You're on mute.
I do it well, too. First and foremost, thank you guys so much for having me here this evening. I always try to find a place to start from. And so I'll start from here today. In essentials, unity. In non-essentials, liberty. In everything, charity. And so as I go about trying to find a way to have a life of difference, for too long, nothing worked. Everything was a program. It came to community. Some people made a lot of money, and they took their ball and left the community. And so when this opportunity came up, the thing that I loved about it, that was from its inception, the goal was to leave practitioners here, not just come, but leave them, so that the community could have something to build on and build from. And so I actually fought to become a part of this crew. I wasn't a part of Team A or Team B. I think I was Team CDE, but they let me in anyhow. So they had mercy on They had mercy on me. But when I got there, I was going through, and one of the things I always like to tell people is that you really don't know what you're going to get till you get there. And there was a moment I'm like, this makes no sense to me. Why am I here? I did all this for this? Oh, no. And then that moment happened. It's a moment that Dr. Christopher calls science, but I call it magic. It's the moment when it clicks. It's the moment that you hear it and you feel it and you know something has changed in the room. It's something about the atmosphere that shifts and it allows for something that wasn't before to take place. And so it's essential to have people from community be a part of this process. And so I'm grateful for that. And so, but the non-essential was the fact that you sometimes don't believe processes of change, because many of us seen this, done this. You don't think nothing is ever going to happen. Nothing is ever going to change. And all of a sudden, something is changing. Something is happening. And then all of a sudden, but in everything you do and in everything that I give, I try to operate from a space of love, because love never fails. Love never falls short. Love never does anything wrong. And so it doesn't keep count of wrongdoing either. So when you begin to see the change happen, and when you begin to see people open up and take a look at their own personal journeys, and you allow them to walk in that space, be safe in that space, and grow from that space, then you're on to something. And so for me, it was just the fact that we were able to bring people to a place in every circle that I've been through. That moment hit. And when that moment hit, it allowed the rest of the group to be free. It allowed the rest of the group to grow, and it solidified the group in a way that beforehand, I don't think they were. And so for me, that's what it is. I don't know when it's going to happen. I just know that it will. And I've learned to trust the process to watch it happen. I don't have to push it, don't have to force it. I just have to be fully present, fully aware, and make those people in that circle the most important people in the world to have my full attention. So that's what it's done for me. It really just let me know that change can and will happen, and it already has started.
Thanks for that, Patrick. Just the notion of our shared truths, being open to hearing, to sharing our personal stories, our truths, it allows us the ability to see not only our different experiences, but our common threads of humanity. And for me, that's what it was. That was the powerful thing for me, because like all of you have said, I think I went into this my very first time participating in a circle, and I went into this thinking, well, how do we get from can we all just get along to, where transformation, but it isn't can we all just get along at all. It is really, listening, learning, bringing the heart into the work that makes all the difference. Now, I meant to say earlier that if anybody on here watching, if you have questions or comments, please feel free to put them in the chat. We have someone monitoring the chat, and we'll definitely make time to discuss those. But moving on, I do want to ask Isaiah to chime in as to TRHT, racial healing in particular, and its impact on the Community Foundation as an organization. Can you share a little bit with us, Isaiah? I know I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this question, but he's never lost for one.
No. That's actually a really good question, because we started, man, I'm going to quote two different amazing artists. One, you will know the late Michael Jackson said, hey, you got to start with the man in the mirror. And so as we think about how philanthropy engages in this work, there's some external work that we do. Some will call it programmatic, some will call it some granting work, some community work that we need to do. There was also some internal work that we needed to do, because we operate in a system that has perpetuated some disparities that exist in community. And if we weren't in a position to acknowledge that, we were doing to and for community and not with community. And we're a group of 22 individuals that live and work and breathe in this community. So we're doing ourselves a disservice to not acknowledge the privilege with which we actually do the work. So that we started that. We grounded ourselves in that as we started the work. I guess the other artist that I will bring up here, 1967, he had a song. Little Richard had a song that says, "Po dog that won't wag his own tail." Look at Patrick laughing at me already. How do you pull that? All right, my Uncle Lloyd used to say that all the time. My Uncle Lloyd Haney would say, "Same on the po dog that won't wag his own tail." That the reality is, when you're afraid, you tuck your tail. Tucking your tail is the sign of some condition that you might have that needs to be acknowledged or addressed. But we aren't afraid to step into this work. We've acknowledged that there's a history, a local history, and a national history that exists. But the Community Foundation is grounded in centering race equity, centering the idea that not only disparities exist, but systemic inequities kind of perpetuate those disparities. And we have a responsibility for responding directly to those because we are bringing both truth and power to tables to address issues that exist in community. And so we step into this work while not only looking at ourselves internally, but also holding up our commitment to community by stepping into it with community. And so, Lynn, I hope I answered your question, but both Michael Jackson and Little Richard are ringing in my head as I think about how we step into this work.
Yeah, definitely. Good answer. And just underscoring that, having been at the Community Foundation, as Isaiah said, for 22 years as of January 10th, I can say that being involved in the work has really begun transformation from our organization, transformation of our organization, as an organization that is really, we've gone from, like Isaiah said, doing to really deepening our abilities to work with community, but also to really look at ourselves, to let community lead, and to deal honestly with some difficult issues. So I really appreciate having the opportunity to be a part of this work. So with that said, the next question I'm just going to throw out here for anybody to respond to: what do you see as some of the challenges of doing this work in community? Anybody, any particular challenges, struggles, if you will, still that exist?
It's called waking up in the morning. Because when you wake up in the morning, you don't know what the next issue of the day is going to be. And sometimes when you start doing this work, you wonder if your 15 minutes is going to run out. Is the clock going to run out before you get done what you really need to get done? Because this country has a tendency to move on and move into something else. And so for me, I'm just grateful that for some reason the clock keeps winding, and we might be at 14:01, but we get another day to try to deal with this. One of the things that Isaiah brought up that I want to reiterate on is this idea that you got to do your own work, right? I can't do your work for you. I can do your work with you. I just can't do your work for you. You have to wrestle with those things from the inside of you, the way that you were brought up, where you were brought up at, the way that you see the world, your political ideation. I don't know. All I know is there's some things in here that if you're not willing to deal with, things don't change. And so for me, that's where I am right now. I'm just hoping that when I wake up tomorrow, I don't hear that the next black man has been killed. I don't want to hear that the next water crisis has happened. I don't want to hear the next thing. But in reality, the next thing is coming because that's just the world we live in. The question is, how do we begin to work through these things and move to a better future?
Go ahead, Dr. Deborah. I think you wanted to say something.
Oh, when I saw you on mute, I just muted back. What I would say is that, and I love what Patrick said, because I do believe people wake up with everything that's in front of them. And so the thought that you're going to add something else, I think is a challenge for people, because many of us now are stretched, right? Like we are really stretched. But the thought that there's something available, and all I can say is, in my experience, the whole community hasn't participated in this process. But after I did, my whole community occurred very differently for me. I saw possibility both in people and processes and opportunities and new openings to do the work in a new way that I didn't see before. So it was transformational for me because I did something and everything out there looked different. See, a lot of times it looks like the problem is out there, right? And I always tell people on your best day, if you wake up committed to being better and doing better, that's work, right? It's very difficult to try to impact the people out there, the systems and the structures out there. But what I got had me see new openings for actions and new opportunities. And it also shifted how I relate to people. I got this expanded capacity to be with people and their humanity, right? My grandfather used to say, hurt people hurt people. And I got that in a much deeper way. I got my own hurt and I have a lot more compassion for other people's hurt. So I think the barrier that people have in having survived their own hurt and trauma and own lived experience, waking up every day just trying to get through the day, if you don't see something as a real opportunity, why would you make it a priority? And that's what I love about the scale at which we've done it so far, because I feel like are building this critical mass of people. I feel like if we could get more people in this framework and on their own personal healing journey, the people who will be doing the work will be more competent, more capable, and more empowered in the work. Because if I'm going to work, I want to be my best self. I don't want to work and at the end of the day be so ground down that I have nothing left for my family. Like I have a new way of being around it that leaves me more inspired. Like I'm not tired at the end of the day. I'm inspired at the end of the day. And I think most of what we do doesn't leave us that way. So a lot of people don't want one more thing that's just going to tax their schedule. And that's why I think this conversation is so important to let people know there's a real unparalleled opportunity here for something that will be transformational for self and also potentially transformational for our entire community.
Yeah, and just to build on to that, I think, that sense of personal transformation emerging particularly from a healing circle can be a really compelling thing. And the challenge, or one of the challenges that I think can happen, is how to make sure that we can transfer that energy and also carry that out in a really thoughtful way into the wider world. Racial healing and the healing circles are certainly a core pillar of the TRHT process, but that whole separation that exists in the justice system, in health, in media, in education, in public safety, like all these different ways in which this false hierarchy of human value has infiltrated our society. That's a big challenge. It's not an insurmountable one. And I think we live in a moment right now where more people's ears are attuned to how do we change that than maybe we've been attuned to in the past. But I also am mindful that, like yesterday was Dr. King's, the King holiday, and how many folks were comfortable putting up a hashtag or a quote who aren't yet maybe comfortable showing up in other ways. And so there's a lot of potential through things like TRHT to engage folks in a way that maybe they haven't found the space to step forward. And there's also kind of a charge that comes with that to how do we build upon that interest, that engagement, that newfound sense of connection and empathy to really build a strategic movement, because we can't stop in the circle. We have to carry it out into all the different realms of our lives.
Thank you for that. Mona, it looks like you were about to say something. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say it is, I think, a bit like peeling back an onion, and there are layers and layers. And, we have hundreds of years of history and that separation to undo. hundreds of years. And so I think it's really important to not think of the TRHT work as a program. And I think that the healing speeds up the more people are part of it, but it's also very important that it grow into all of the different systems. So sometimes that just looks like one person from an organization calls up Lynn, not to put you on the spot, but calls up Lynn to say, I would really love to do a racial healing circle in my organization. And that creates a whole new opening. And so I think we have to think about every sector. I think one of the challenges with that is we need to scale up the number of racial healing practitioners there are. That takes time to do because it's a pretty intensive training, but it's so worth it. So I'm excited for the coming years. I mean, this is not going to be a program that can just drop, I know Elizabeth and I and others have been part of anti-racism work and programming in the past. And when the funding ran out, that work stopped. I mean, it carried on with us but we really do need to bake this as a way of being in every corner of civic life and even within our families. But I think thinking about every sector, every industry. And so if anybody out there who's listening is thinking about like, oh, how could I be part of this? I would just really encourage you to think about starting with a circle in your own organization. And you're going to come out of it. You're going to see opportunities for change in ways that you may not have seen before. And I think the other thing that I want to highlight is there's the heart work of the circles, and then there's the head work. And a lot of times what we've done is we've paired a racial healing circle, and then after it done a visioning session where we dig into, okay, what are those specific changes that need to happen? And I think we're getting more and more versed in how to do this. It becomes more and more fluid. But I think that is essential, and it does take some time to do, but it is an investment in that kind of change. So it is definitely worth the time. I think sometimes we get stuck on time though, but if you dedicate the time up front, the transformation can happen.
Thank you. Those were some amazing answers. And I can tell how long we've been working together because all of you anticipated and answered the next question that I was going to ask about opportunities. So what I'll do now, there are a couple of questions in the chat. So I'll throw them out and anybody who wants to respond can. Kenneth Vaughn asks, what do you tell the young people in Flint who are afraid to step into this space due to their peers' opinions? Do we offer a space for them to collaborate with like minds? Go ahead, Patrick.
Oh, I was just going to say absolutely. Again, one of the things that leadership requires is someone has to step forward. And Kenneth, you being on this call shows that you're a leader. And so how do we get other people? We just come. And we've done circles with young people before, and we know that this process works. And in the near future, there's going to be a call out to community to raise up young healing practitioners so that they can go and meet their people in their space. And so we're going to be looking for people like you, Kenneth, not only you, but others. I just want to make it be clear. We're not looking for people who are all on the honor roll. We're not looking for people who just, I wasn't on service at school, but I do know that there are people there who really do care and just need an opportunity to use their voice. And when you do that, you could open up a whole future of possibilities for them. And so look forward to coming, bro. We coming for you. Stay in touch.
Anybody else? Young people?
Yeah, I would add one thing about the young folks. Sorry, Brother Oliver, which is that in my healing circle, there were some youth leaders. And in some of the follow-up work that we've done, and Lynn, I know you've done some great work that I think very much aligns with this, even with your own son. The thing that I think is this. I am the mom of 3 Gen Zers. I have Lord, I must have had her when I was about 5. I have a 20-year-old and a 22-year-old and a 23-year-old, and I have a almost 5-month-old granddaughter. They march to a very different beat. So, like I said, one of the things I got and I'm saying in a good way, these are folks who are not waiting for my generation or the generation before me to hand them the reins. If they can't take the reins, they say, you keep your horse and carriage, we'll make our own way. Like, there is something I think really magical and mighty about these young millennials and these Gen Zers. They are literally, like, it used to be a proper order of things, right? Like, you almost had to be knighted by the previous generation. They had to bring you in. They had to qualify you, if you will. And they said, we're not waiting. I don't need you to qualify me. I'm qualified because I have my own lived experience, and I'm going to do what I need to do. If you're not going to help me or support me, I'll find my own way. I love that fight and that spirit in them. I can tell you the work is the work, and it works because it's about what it is to be a human being. See, at the bottom of healing is humanity. That's the thing that we all share, right? These other constructs and things about how our world works, and race and racism and class and classism and all those things do is add space in between us all to mask our humanity from one another. So I definitely think that the work is for young people. And this isn't the thing where it's for us to tell them all that they need to do it. If we are great about creating a world of possibility for them and what might be available to empower them, given who they already are, as the keepers and the holders and the creators of our future, then they will be the credible messenger for their peers. We all know what it's like. I remember when my kids used to wear Vans, the shoes Vans, and nobody wore Vans because they weren't expensive and they weren't cool. Everybody was wearing $200 sneakers, and I'm buying them $30 Vans. And then all of a sudden, Vans became cool and kids started wearing Vans. I think a conversation for transformation and our future, where community is in the driver's seat, has agency and controls their own outcomes, is very consistent with a conversation of young millennials and Gen Zers. And I say young millennials because Isaiah is an older millennial, so I'm not talking about that age group. I'm not talking about the 40-year-old millennials. I'm talking about the 20s, the millennials in their 20s and early 30s. This is like their conversation. They are this, and they have a lot less barriers to standing with possibility. The older you get, the more typically cynical and resigned you get. So this is a conversation for young people. And I think as they get into it, they will take the reins and truly be the ones leading the work and leading the conversation.
So I'm not only following her because she just called out my age. That's not the only reason why I'm following her. But I'll just say this. I appreciate the pairing of this question. And I don't know if that was intentional or not, Kim, but I appreciate the pairing of the question. I agree with the answers that both Patrick and Dr. Deborah on whether or not young people should be engaged in this. I think there is a conversation to have not only in our community but across the landscape about how we protect or create this safe space for that engagement. I had a mentor back when I was coming up that would step into some conversations and say, "Hey, Isaiah, that's a hit I can take. You can't take it," right? And so we have to take advantage of the space that we're in to learn while we're not on the front lines, and allow some of those older millennials, if you will, Dr. Deborah, right? Or some Gen Xers to take some of those hits while you're learning, because there's an opportunity to not only do the work, but to learn from the mistakes of the generation that didn't fix it. Because if we could fix it, we would have done it already. So it's clear that our generation isn't going to fix the problem. So how do you learn from our mistakes and step fully into your capacity to actually address the problem? That is by allowing us to take some of those hits. So we have to be in coordination with one another as we're addressing these issues. We've got to trust and respect the position and the perspective of a young leader step into this space. And they also have to appreciate the lived experience of a more seasoned individual in the space. And our partnership is going to be what's going to get us through. But oftentimes what I see happening all too often is we don't create the space. And so when I create my own space and my own safety net, that I don't need you for anything. And so now I'm not leaning to your lived experiences. I'm not trying to understand or interrogate your truth and understand how I connect to it. I'm doing this on my own and you're doing it on your own. And as a result, we don't get to the finish line together. And so I think the coordination is really important. And I appreciate the pairing of that question about space and engagement.
All right. Thank you, everybody. There was a question that asked, does this work get easier over time?
I'll take a shot at that one. It's the new year, and a whole lot of people are showing up at gyms. And so Ed Wilson and Quentin, and they're all packed up right now because people are going into the gym. And as you know, when you first go into the gym, you grab the weights and you're on your own. People are trying to see how dedicated you are. Are you going to come back next week? Are you going to come back the week after that? But if you continue to go and you continue to grab those weights, you continue to grab those dumbbells, and people that can see your consistency, then they start coming over to spot you. Then they start giving you helpful tips. And I think that's how this work is going to play out. When you first jump into the race equity work, people are trying to figure out why you're coming to it. What's your angle? What is your end? And as you see, they see you engage, they see you bring your full self to this, and they see you bring yourself consistently. Then people step in and say, let me tell you a part of my story. Let me help you understand how I got here. Let me help you understand how I got over this. Let me tell you about the first time I had this conversation, the first time I laughed loud, first time I smiled really big, the first time I cried really hard and I felt hard. Like, people begin to engage you at a personal level once they see your commitment. And as a result, in my opinion, it gets easier because it's a lighter load when we're all lifting it. But at first, I'm skeptical about why people are stepping into this space. Is it personal gain? Is it taking advantage? Is it guilt? And so when you don't know, you step off a little bit. And so that's one answer, just my perspective. I'm sure that there are others.
Well, just to add to that, I think that anytime you're engaging in talking about issues that have really touched us individually, socially, historically, in such profound ways that wherever you're starting from, there's always more depth to experience. And so the entry point of a conversation or the entry point of reading a book and discussing it with somebody, there's so many different ways to enter this pool of how to understand race and its effects on us personally and socially. That one experience is going to give you that one experience, but continuing to remain dedicated to that, as Isaiah said, to keep coming back to it, to be willing to at some point realize I need to go back and do my own study or self-reflection before I can really be that reciprocal partner to hear somebody else. That there's lots of different ways to come at this work, and it is a process. It is an ongoing lived process. There are things that I'm ready to understand or hear and try to figure out now that I wasn't ready to understand or hear or try to figure out 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And it's a developmental process, I think, of how do we undo this learning of racism that we have been all steeped in. And I think for me as a white person, one of the really important pivot points is being able to understand something about what it is to be steeped in it and to have some of it soak up into you, regardless of if you intended it or not, or if you were aware of it or not. And that recognition doesn't mean I'm a bad person or that I should feel guilt and feel awful about myself, but it's really understanding like the mechanics of the world that we live in. And if you start understanding something about it, you can start trying to peel off those layers and get closer to really who are we at our core. And that's, again, one of the things I think really is valuable about this process, because it requires you to reflect on something that is core to you. And it requires you to see and feel and hear what is core to somebody else. And so often we see each other on that superficial level. And if we're going to heal, we really have to go beyond that.
Wow, thank you, Elizabeth. These have been some amazing answers. I mean, this has just been an awesome conversation. I want to lift up another comment that is in the chat from Craig Levitt. He says, my experience is the circle is a sacred space in and of itself. It is the fundamental power of the circle. It is a safe place. And then I think I'll pose this question as the last question, and then I will turn it over to Isaiah after that for closing. But Del Whale asks, if this work really takes hold, what will our community look like in 10 years or 25 years?
I can tell you, for me, it would be a community that works for everyone. See, what we know is right now, the way things are structured, and this is not unique to Flint or to Genesee County. I always tell people this stuff got baked in when our country was founded. How it shows up and how it manifests, there's a little bit of variation, but there's generally, it's not baked in. So imagine you bake a cake and you forget to put the sugar in. You can't just sprinkle it on top afterwards and expect that to taste like a cake. So what we're trying to do now is to get these things baked in. You can't almost even undo it. It has to be a transformation. And to me, when that occurs, what we'll see is the great talent that we know is evenly distributed. We'll also see opportunity evenly distributed. That great brilliance that we know that is within all of us, we'll see it show up. We won't have so many Isaiah Olivers, the first Black CEO of the Community Foundation. We won't have so many of these things. We'll have really, truly a community that works for everyone. And people can say whatever they want. I call Flint the birthplace of the American dream because it was the first city where you could be a regular guy, regular gal, go graduate high school, get yourself a job, buy a house, own a car, send your kids to college. Like, that was the American dream, right? We will see a better actualization of that. And Flint being a place where many of these things started, Flint is the birthplace of community schools, of unions, of sit-down strikes. A lot of what has happened in Flint, I always tell people, would have wiped most cities off the map. Yet, not only here we are, but here we are still Flint strong and thriving. So what I see is a community that is at the forefront of this movement nationally, and a community that works for everyone, independent of race, religion, gender, sexual orientation, all of those things.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No.
I just wanted to say two things along those lines. I think we will have a common, much wider common interrogation of what it means to jettison a hierarchy of human value. To really think about, like Deborah was saying, all of those different spaces in our lives where we maybe unknowingly are holding on to this hierarchy, whether it be by age or race or sexual orientation or ability. It's all of those things. And then you start to peel it away and think about all the different layers of how policy is set up to uphold these this false belief, right? Like, these policies created out of a mindset that we're trying to destroy, really a really harmful mindset that we know has no place in our world, never did. And so now it's our job to shine light on it and then make that mindset go away. And I want to go back to the second thing is I want to go back to something that both Isaiah and Deborah touched on in the video, which is this idea of people coming together who, like before the water crisis, everybody worked in their own little spheres. And because of the water crisis, people started coming together that found a new reason to come together that they had not imagined before. I think TRHC is doing a similar thing, both within organizations and also the general community circles, because you have people from different walks of life coming together and building a relationship that's created in this space, because everybody wants social change, but maybe you're coming at it from, not everybody, but the people I think who come to these circles want social change or want to make things better. But when we build the relationships, then we will have that stronger basis to make that policy change that needs to happen. Well, in 25 years, in 10 years, think of how many more people will be connected and see opportunities for that change that would not have been possible with QRHC. I think that is part of the huge promise of it. And then again, just coming back to this idea of a shift in how we relate to each other and do business. And I think, again, it comes back to interrogating in ourselves and interrogating within our institutions and our workplaces, this whole hierarchy of human value. And it takes time to do it. But if we're looking that far out, I think, I just think there's so much possibility. I think we could think about questions that might feel a little uncomfortable, right? Like, we have all this housing and we have homeless people. Can we think about that differently if we jettison this idea of hierarchy of human value? We could maybe see possibilities and solutions that just aren't really happening in Flint. So that's my hope for 10 and 25 years out.
Thank you. So thank you all for not only for your participation on this podcast, but for all you do and for really being who you are. As you all out here listening can see, these are superheroes. They really are. With that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Isaiah.
And the hardest thing to do after an amazing panel like this is have the final word. I first want to thank Lynn Williams for facilitating this conversation. Thank you so much. It's an amazing conversation that we had with Dr. Deborah Furhold and Mrs. Elizabeth Jordan, Mrs. Mona Monroe Eunice, I never say the Monroe part, and Mr. Patrick McNeil. You all are giants in our community. You're extraordinary people, but moreover, you're doing extraordinary things. So thank you so much for your contributions. I always like to say when I start thinking about the work that we're doing is that healing starts with a conversation, much like the one that we just had. An honest reckoning with the truth, our own personal truths, the truths of our nation, the truths of our local communities, an honest reckoning with those truths that move toward a jettisoning of the belief, a getting rid of the belief in the hierarchy of human value, and then somehow taking all that we learn from those two things and transforming a community, really co-creating a community that works, in the words of Dr. Deborah Furholden, for everyone. And that's the journey that we're on. We're only at the start of that journey. We're excited about the work that's happening right now, but we also understand that journey or the trek that we're going to be on together is going to take a long time. It took us a long time to get here. It's going to take a long time and a lot of commitment to get through it. If you'd like to learn more about what the Community Foundation is doing in this space, you can look. I would say www, but I think that says that I'm an older millennial. So I'm going to say cfgf.org/TRHT. There you will find some of the work that we've been doing with, when I say that Kellogg instigated this work, I like to call our partners co-conspirers in this work with us, and you'll get to see the work of our co-conspirers. You'll also see opportunities for you to give time and talent, and ultimately, there is a give button where you can give of your treasure to support this work. As you know, the systems that are perpetuating disparities are well funded. And we've got to find ways to invest resources in dismantling those systems. And so this is the start of the work for us. And so we encourage you all not only to go to that website, cfgf.org/TRHT, and click on any of the buttons. You can learn, you can live into the work with us, you can fall in love with it, and you can also give. Again, thank you all for joining us. It's 1 hour and 4 minutes. And I always close by saying we want to end on time, because we want you all to log on when we start again. So thank you so much for joining us, and thank you all for all of your contributions to this conversation.